Welcome back to the show. Rick Tittle with you, coast to coast and around the world on the American Forces Radio Network. It's great to welcome back to the show Phil Steele, a college football guru. And looking at my Gucci, it's about that time because we are in August and we're getting ready for a little NCAA football. Phil, welcome to the show once again. Before we get going, we obviously just learned of the passing of Bobby Bowden. Where does he rank for you in the pantheon of college football coaches?
Well, there's been a lot of great college football head coaches, but I'd have to put him in the top five. You take a look at the program he inherited there at Florida State and what he accomplished. I mean, it was an amazing streak that he had, 10 or 15 straight seasons where they finished in the top three. Taking a Florida State team that nobody really knew about, and then they went out and played all the big boys. They started upsetting them and really built that team into a powerhouse, and he did it the right way. So I would definitely put him right at the top.
I remember when William Floyd was with the 49ers years ago, and he got hurt, and he started talking about how lucky he's been, and he was going on about how Bobby Bowden was his father. He said he literally was like my father, and I don't think I ever heard a guy talk about a coach like that.
Yeah, Warwick Dunn said the same thing because he had lost both his parents, and he felt that Bobby Bowden was like his dad as well. So, I mean, he was just a great person and a great head coach.
All right, so when we think about this college football season, and we thought we were out of the woods with this virus, and now, of course, we have whatever fourth wave, whatever you want to call it. But Lane Kiffin was saying, hey, Ole Miss, we have 100% vaccination. There are a lot of places that they'll say, well, we're not going to get vaccinated, or we're going to test ourselves every other week. Is it going to be the same type of carnage that we were looking at last year, or do you think we're going to be able to fight through this and get a full schedule in for everybody?
I think we're going to get a full schedule in with very few, if any, cancellations this year. They set a precedent where they said if 85% of the players get vaccinated on your team, you don't have to go through the testing process for those that are vaccinated, and I think that's really going to help this year. So I'm really anticipating, I would say 99.9% of the games that are on the schedule getting played as scheduled this year.
Good stuff. Now, the other thing I think is interesting is the whole name, image, likeness. This is going to be our first year where this is going to be a thing. We've already had Coach Saban talking about how his quarterback might be getting close to being a millionaire, and it's a great recruiting tool as well, as saying that look, if you stick around here, you can make cash as well. No one knows what this is going to do to these student athletes. I don't know how much of a student they have to be anymore, but what do you think about the whole NIL and its effect it's going to have?
Well, I think the NIL will be the rich get richer. The teams with the biggest boosters will attract the best players and be able to pay them. And you take a look at the Alabama situation, for example. Their starting quarterback, Bryce Young, who's going to get close to $1 million, hasn't even started a football game yet. So it's based on the projection. And I think what we're going to see is the bigger teams, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, and your Clemsons, continue to land the best players, and we'll see them at the top.
All right, we know that, and it's not going to happen for a couple of years, but finally Oklahoma and Texas are going to bolt, and they're going to go to the SEC. What happens now, not just with the Big 12, but I think about also the Pac-12? Should they jump out and, take an OK State and a Texas Tech right now and be a Pac-14? Do they combine to create a 2014? I mean, what's going to happen, do you think?
Yeah, Rick, I think I've said for the last 3 years I thought we were headed for 4 16-team super conferences, and that may be the way we are. And I think for these schools, they're in limbo right now. Make your decisions and get aligned with somebody. I think that's probably where we're headed, is 4 16-team super conferences.
And then, the Heisman, I keep hearing Spencer Rattler's name, and not always does the preseason favorite end up winning it, obviously, because, if I think about Joe Burrow, no one was mentioning him before that season, and he had basically the best season in the history of college football. So who to you looks like a guy who might be at the Downtown Athletic Club?
Yeah, and I did go with Spencer Rattler this year for the fact that Lincoln Riley, the head coach of Oklahoma, has had 3 veteran quarterbacks when he has. 2 of those guys have won the Heisman Trophy. The other quarterback was a Heisman finalist. And when you look at Spencer Rattler this year, I think he responded well to getting benched against Texas last year, came and was really improved down the stretch. And then this year, he's got my number 1 rated offensive line in front of him, my number 2 set of receivers in the country, number 4 running back. He'll be piloting the most potent offense in the country. And I've got Rattler as my favorite as well to win the Heisman Trophy this year. But, you know, you touched on it. Last year, Alabama, their leading wide receiver at midseason was Jalen Waddle. And then Devontae Smith emerged after Waddle got injured. He was the number 2 receiver, turned into the number 1 receiver, and won the Heisman Trophy. So talk about coming out of nowhere. It can happen.
A couple more questions here for Phil Steele as we talk about NCAA football coming up here in a week. Jim Harbaugh has been an interesting case for the last few years, and obviously the 8-game winning streak that the Buckeyes have over the Wolverines is the longest since that any of us have seen, 1909. Last year, 2-4, I guess, in those 6 games. He did get an extension, but it's mostly incentive-laden, and the AD there, Ward Manuel, can actually save money by firing him. So is this about the hottest seat in big-time college football?
Yeah, I would think clearly, especially, and you look at Michigan's schedule this year. They have a lot of, it's a tough schedule. It's 12th toughest in the nation. They play Washington at home. They have to play at Wisconsin, at Nebraska, at Penn State. They get Ohio State at home, Northwestern at home, Indiana. So it's a schedule where there's a lot of games. I think the ceiling for Michigan this year, if everything goes well, is probably 9-3, and the floor would probably be 5-7. And I think if it was 5-7, there probably would be a coaching change.
Sticking up there with Iowa State, and you can think about maybe a good team they had in March Madness now and then. You don't think of them as a football program as much, but Matt Campbell is so hot. He was turning down NFL offers, and, of course, they beat Oklahoma in Ames and then in the Big 12 championship game and went down to the wire. But maybe the best tight end in college football and Charlie Kolar. They got Mike Rose on defense. Brock Purdy has already set 25 passing records. They're calling him the greatest quarterback in Iowa State history. You got Breece Hall as an All-American running back. Should we up the Cyclones and pay a little more attention?
Yeah, and if you would have told me 6 years ago when Matt Campbell was hired, you have a national title contender in 6 years, I would have laughed. They were coming off 3-2 and 3-win seasons, and had rarely even been ranked in their history. But this year they've got that opportunity. And now you mentioned some of the key players there. I think they have the best tight end room in college football with Charlie Kolar and Chase Allen. And then you look at their offensive line. It was young last year. They got better as the season went on, and this year they've got all 5 starters back. And Coach Campbell told me that this is the deepest offensive line that he's had, and it has a chance to be really special. Team that with Purdy, Breece Hall, an outstanding receiver in Xavier Hutchinson, and that defense, which is always good. And this is a team that's a legitimate national title contender. They do have to get past Oklahoma on the road on November 20th, and then perhaps again in the Big 12 title game to get there. But I think they're legit this season.
The Fighting Irish are always in the conversation, even when they're lousy, but we know in the last 4 years they have mattered. And Brian Kelly starting his 12th season there, only Nuke Rockne with 13 years coached longer there. But that transfer portal, it basically gifted him Jack Cohn, the former Wisconsin quarterback, the safety Kyle Hamilton, the All-American. He returns. What can you tell us about Jack Cohn, and do you think he'll be the starter?
Yeah, Cohn's got to beat out Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner, but I think he does. And Cohn's a guy that won 10 games with Wisconsin 2 years ago, and it's got pretty good surrounding cast. Kyron Williams is one of the top running backs in the country. They're going to have some receivers emerge. That's probably the biggest question mark is at wide receiver, but no question marks about tight end with Michael Mayer there. And the offensive line, which lost 4 starters, brings back Jared Patterson and adds in Marshall transfer Kane Madden, and they've got two other guys with starting experience. I think they'll be better than expected. No problems with the defense, 6 starters back, and defense is what won this team games last year. They held opponents to just 19.7 points per game. When you look at their schedule, Rick, there's no easy games on the schedule, but then again, there's no unwinnable games on the schedule. They're only an underdog in one game this year, a slight underdog against Wisconsin, about a 1.5-point favorite there, or 1.5-point underdog there. This is a Notre Dame team where my main set of power ratings actually has them running the table. So I think the chances are there for Notre Dame, provided Jack Cohn can emerge at that quarterback spot and give him steady play.
Yeah, it'll be interesting when he faces the Badgers for sure. Let's go down to College Station, because if you think about what did they give Jimbo Fisher, like $75 million. Texas A&M, you think, would take a step back without Kellen Pond, but they still have that wrecking crew defense. You got a guy like Isaiah Spiller, 1,000-yard rusher. By the way, Spiller, I don't know if you saw, he just got $10,000 for an interview because it fell into the category of NIL. But how do you see the Aggies?
I love the Aggies this year, and I think Jimbo Fisher's worth every penny because he's got this team as a legitimate national title contender. I love his 4 recruiting classes. In fact, going through the team with Coach Fisher, each of his 4 years, you can see the depth building. You get to the third string, and they are loaded with very talented players. The biggest question mark with A&M this year is the offensive line. They lose 4 starters, but Coach Fisher told me that this year's offensive line is more talented, has more NFL prospects. In fact, all 5 starters are NFL prospects. Of the 4 offensive linemen that left last year, only one of them got drafted, and that in the 4th round. So they probably do have more talent on the offensive line. I like Haynes King at quarterback. I think he comes in and puts in Kellen Mond-type stats. They've got the best running back core in the country. Their receivers were young last year. They're much improved. And that defense last year led the SEC, allowing just 317 yards per game. They get Alabama at home on October the 9th, and that game's going to be huge. And I know they lost to Bama by 28 points last year, but if you go back and watch the first half of that game, I think there was 4 key plays were the difference. Other than that, they played Alabama even up. College Station's going to be extremely loud. That could be a potential tricky game for Alabama and potentially put A&M in the mix for a national title this year.
We just have about a minute. Last question for you. And you think about the Crimson Tide and their first-round picks, quarterback, tailback, wide receiver, another wide receiver. So I keep reading that Georgia is the favorite in the SEC and that Alabama and Georgia are going to meet in Atlanta December 4th for the championship anyway. But do you see the Bulldogs the same way?
I think Alabama will enter the year number 1 in the AP poll, so they'll be number 1 heading into the season. But I do think Georgia's their main threat, and they're a clear favorite in the East. They've got the best schedule, and they've got the most talent of any team in the East. Watch out with JT Daniels at quarterback, and they've got my number 3 rated defense. Plus, after they play Clemson, they'll be favored in all 11 games this year.
Just real quick, North Carolina, can they beat Clemson? You look at Sam Howell, he threw more touchdowns than Trevor Lawrence did last year.
They have a shot. Yeah, I give them a puncher's chance in that game. I think Clemson will probably be about a 10-point favorite if they meet in the ACC title game, but Sam Howell definitely gives them a shot.
Phil, where can people check out more of you online or anywhere else?
I appreciate that, Rick. The magazine's available at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, or you can go to philsteele.com. That's STEELE.com to order the magazine. And follow me on Twitter. It's at PhilSteele042. That's at PhilSteele042.
Phil, thanks for your time and your insights. Always appreciate talking ball with you, buddy.
Hey, great talking football with you today, Rick.
All right. I'm Rick Tittle. Come on back on Sports Byline.